Welcome to the June 6th Heartwork and Philosophy Guild meeting. And as is our habit, we will start with welcoming, and you're welcome to join us in this part. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. And do I have anyone who would like to volunteer their land acknowledgement with us?
I'm happy to volunteer.
Okay.
And I will do a short and sweet land acknowledgement. We start with the land as a reminder that the land is what unites us and connects us. So when we say we are acknowledging the land, we are acknowledging not just the territory, but all of our relations and the interconnected web of being. And we are acknowledging our role in place in the whole. And in doing so, we express also a debt of gratitude to Indigenous cultures who have kept this wisdom alive through generations and through generations of explicit, direct attempts to destroy this way of knowing and this way of working. And so we have a deep debt of gratitude. And with that gratitude comes an obligation to be good neighbors, to be in right relations, to heal any relationships that have been harmed along the way, to reconnect with relationships that have been lost. And so I acknowledge specifically the WSÁNEĆ, who are the traditional stewards of this land that I find myself on. And in doing so, I make another commitment. I renew my commitment to being a good relation and being a good ancestor. And I invite you all to take a moment to acknowledge where you are, the land on which you are currently living, and to take a moment to connect with what being in right relations with the land and your neighbors and yourself might look like. Back to you, Roland.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think let's just take 3 deep breaths in your own time. And when we come back, we will do a check-in question. Lovely. Is anyone inspired with a check-in question today? And a check-in question is to help situate us in being here now with this guild.
I have a suggestion.
Cool.
The question would be, what is bright on your horizon at the moment?
Well, right in the circle as I see it is Ben, myself, and April. So let's start with Ben.
What is bright on my horizon? I feel like there's multiple things bright on the horizon, but you know what? We just had a morning working outside with our woofers and doing a little bit in the garden and getting some stuff ready. And that's really what's bright on my horizon, is that spending time in the garden. Yeah, that's just lovely. So over to you, Roland.
Well, and I wonder, what does bright mean and what does horizon mean? And the horizon is essentially we're always on the horizon for someone somewhere. And so the horizon is everywhere. And what's bright in my mind is what is vibrant, what's happening right now, and it's pretty much the same, having a different kind of energy, with having new people and interested people around, um, uh, is an interesting exploration on the motivations between in how to organize time and why. So over to April.
Yeah, I always have questions about horizons as well. Which horizon, who says? Which direction do I look in? But I do know that I have to keep changing my viewpoint from what's right in front of me and what's farther away, changing lenses. And unless I can see the horizon, I'm not reminded to look even farther out and up to the North Star. That's kind of my purpose. Um, and so it's important for me to find the horizon and also to know that on the horizon there's something that's a little bit bright that acts like a beacon, I suppose. And it's really people and some of the projects that I'm working with at the minute that are bright and reminding me of important things. On to Ben.
Well, back to Roland.
Back to Roland.
Yes. I was actually wondering, does it make sense that the note taker shares screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm Ben, are you volunteering as
Yeah, I'm
note taker?
volunteering. Yeah.
So would you share screen? Oh, perfect. You're already there. Look at you.
Johnny on the spot.
So in our process, we um shall we quickly go through the agreements? Does that sound good? So I propose to do it as a cheer. So I'm going to start off with, we're all in this how?
Together.
Ideas and suggestions are addressed to who?
We
Somebody else.
Hey, you have choice and choices have what?
Consequences.
We lead with
Curiosity,
curiosity.
kindness, patience,
and
compassion, and gentleness.
and
Stuff.
listen for what?
Understanding.
Speak from the heart.
What's true for me?
Both,
And
not either.
Or
Have fun.
no.
Be silly.
Well, okay, now what? So and so now it's just to let you know that the session is recorded and it'll be posted to YouTube. So if during the session there's any moment when you're feeling like there's information or topics that you would rather not have shared publicly, then you can let us know and they can be edited. And is there anything to add in terms of agreements? Do you need anything else to be able to show up and be present here, or do you have any questions or concerns?
I am good. I feel fine. Over to you, Roland.
I have nothing to add. April?
I have nothing to add either. Thank you.
Fantastic. And just as a reminder that of the primary function of the guild, is to act as the emotional heart of the Lifeboat Academy, creating opportunities for people to develop deeper relationships with themselves, each other, and all our relations on the farm. And so I propose that we move we're familiar with the responsibilities. Are we good with moving on to the agenda? April?
Yes, I am good with that.
Me too.
Okay, so let's do that. Okie dokie. So we have the action items from the last meeting. I'll just read through them and then we can get to setting the agenda. So should we do, so there's the action items. Do we do updates on them or just go into agenda setting?
I can do updates because they're all mine and none of them are done. So that's the update. Yeah, I think that other things have overcome my ability to move these forward. And yeah, so and we haven't really talked about when we want to enact the brainstorming part. So anyhow, none of them will take very much time. They're all pretty straightforward. They just haven't been done yet. So
And
back to you, Roland.
thanks. So this is also the setting the agenda priorities is this from last time, or is this stuff that's carried over into this?
I think this is from last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't review
Can
this.
we,
Although I would say Connect the Dots Club, coming
yeah,
back to that, is I would leave that as a priority.
yeah.
Um,
I don't think I don't know if we have, maybe just change things a little bit because we also haven't had an opportunity to really talk about establishing badges. And I don't know if we'll get to it today, but I would suggest that we could keep that over to you, April.
Yeah, I like that suggestion.
yeah, me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this the correct order of things to discuss? I think I would say yes. April, what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree because I think that it's possible having the badges as a frame of reference, because there may also be some connection between the Connect the Dots Club and badges. So that there may
Okay.
be talking about the one might lead to the other.
Okay. All right. Shall we dive in then? Cool. So we have a whole wackadoo of considerations,
Mhm.
and
I guess we should start with where are we, a reminder of where we are.
yeah,
Um, so actually, do you want me to, 'cause since I'm steering, I could also just um
yeah. Why don't you guide us through it?
yeah, I'm thinking, and here's what I'm going to propose is we go kind of section by section. I'll read through the section and then we'll just do a quick round, any comments, questions, additions, that sort of thing. So the goal and purpose is to generate of the Connect the Dots Club, formerly Book Club, is to generate a list of that could serve as our first semester Intro to the Lifeboat Academy course, and could also be a lit review for our research proposal. Elements of the list would be a short list of main topics, almost like the follow-up courses that would follow on the first semester. What do they call it? Like a survey course. So it's a survey course of, here are the different topics. Each one would represent a session or two of the seminar and would represent, and each one could be a follow-up. And then within each of those topics, sort of key resources. What are the books or articles that you would recommend? And then, additional readings. And so that's kind of the broad idea, is that what we're doing in the Connect the Dots Club is really to create this kind of reading list, annotated bibliography, etc. So over to you, Roland. Questions, comments, additions?
Just comment. I am remembering the discussion around the academy part of it talking in terms of semesters and loose and unless there's a better word or until we sort of work it out, sort of like the coursework um, or lit review or whatever. And so that sort of educational aspect of how I'm understanding the Connect the Dots Club as a follow-up to the 6 conversations. Over to April.
Yeah, it seems to me that we thought the 6 conversations might generate some other things that we needed to consider here. But I think we also realized that in terms of capacity, we need to dive into the 6 conversations and have some time to have that rolling on before we start considering this project. Just so we don't get overwhelmed in terms of what it is we're doing or how much we're doing. So they are related, and one is a bit foundational to the other. And it may be as we continue to do the Connect the Dots Club and continue to add to our lists, that there's other sort of vehicles that may be developed that we relate in the same way to. So not just the 6 conversations, which is one set of things to do, but there may well be other ways to immerse ourselves that emerge, and we might want to have the reading list and development idea follow on to each of those as well in the future, I'm thinking. Over to Ben.
I think I've captured those thoughts in there. So moving on to the focus, building on what Roland was saying, and actually I think building on what you were saying, April, as well, that so the people that we are most interested in bringing into the Connect the Dots Club now are sort of faculty, prospective faculty, and grad students. And what we will create will be of interest to undergrads, to use that lingo. So right now we're looking for people that have some background knowledge that already, it's not an introduction to the people we want to talk to. It's actually collected pulling resources together. So yeah. Comments, questions on the focus. Who is the focus? Roland, over to you.
I don't have anything to add. Over to April.
I don't have anything to add either. Over to Ben.
All right, moving on to the phases. We have 3 phases that we've identified. Most of the work outlined is actually in phase 1, because phase 1 is the prep work for what's following on. So as April said, while the 6 conversations are underway, we are doing some groundwork, some prep work that will prepare us for the Connect the Dots Club. I guess what we're saying then is that phase 2 is actually really where the club starts to meet.
Right.
I guess to make that clear. So so the prep work is we're currently in the prep work. So we talked about using social media to figure out how to brainstorm favorite books, favorite articles. And so we're thinking about that brainstorming process. This is part of the coordination with outreach, is what are effective ways of using social media to engage people in this kind of like brainstorming. Making sure that we have a landing place so that we can gather information through a lot of different channels, but we can make sure that there's one place where all that information lives. That we will have some role, that the guild will have some role in in seeding that process. So maybe throwing out a couple of our favorite things as a way, or figuring out some provocative questions that we can do as part of that. And that in between the brainstorming and what happens in phase 2, we'll do some sort of prioritizing. So, some sort of dot voting or some kind of way of prioritizing, so that we take a big list and we narrow it down a little bit before we get into it. And it's actually that next point. That's then the guild will do some work massaging that list and getting it ready for discussion for phase 2. And that could be sorting and clustering, identifying topics or themes, prioritizing resources. And we haven't really talked about how that works yet. That we just said that that would be something we do. And then thinking about what happens then when we invite people to the Connect the Dots Club in phase 2. And the engagement plan is so kind of throughout, almost parallel, I think. As we're doing the prep work, we're also engaging people, getting them ready. So part of the question is, and I guess we probably want to kind of underline that, that when do we actually start after the 16th, just so we know what we're inviting people to, how much time we have to get ready. And that will, along the way, we'll be providing updates to the coordination circle, and we will coordinate with the 6 conversations. We've talked about a few that are really straight ways of coordinating, which is referencing the Connect the Dots Club in the outreach, including a follow-up after the 6 conversation, each of the 6 conversations that might link to the Connect the Dots part. And then at the end, inviting everybody in those conversations to continue on in the Connect the Dots Club, and using the standard, that the last one is, using our standard process of inviting. So newsletter, social media, etc. So that's really most of it. I think we can cover phase 2 and 3, which is phase 2 yet to be determined, see earlier comment. And how do we actually think that part of the Connect the Dots Club will work? And then what we produce in the Connect the Dots Club can then be used as the first course for the Lifeboat 101 course, where we go through, here are the topics and here are the resources. So that's the plan as it is. And over to you, Roland. Questions, comments, additions, etc.
Yeah, I guess it is, where do we go from here? And I'm not sure.
Well, actually, and I think that's a great next question. And I
Uh,
think where we go from here is, first of all, answer the question, any comments or additions on what's already there? And then I think the next round is, okay, what's next?
I have nothing to add. Over to April.
I think it's a good plan. I'm liking it better this time that I've seen it than the first time that I saw it. And indeed, my head goes the same place, I think, as Roland, saying what's next. So I'll hold myself ready for that discussion. Over to Ben.
Yeah, the only thing I've wanted to say this, I think, on each round, and there's a part of me that thinks that in some sense we're talking about the future of the Heartwork Guild, and that might just be my over enthusiasm around the connect the dots. But I really think when we're talking about Heartwork, it's various ways of connecting the dots. It's like, how do we,
Yeah.
because it's the connecting the dots between ideas and practices and internally and externally. So anyhow, I agree. I think it's and it does feel, I'm gonna pass it on for next steps, but um yeah, I think let's just get to it. So I guess over to you, Roland, for next steps. And I guess as consideration, we'll start off sort of as considerations for next steps, and then
Okay.
go from there. If that does that work?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, and I am curious about what we started talking about it with the or mentioned it to at the outreach and networking guild meeting that we were going to be looking to that group, which is, I think, hilarious because we are also all three of us in that group. But so I think that it is, what does the Heartwork guild need, sort of like, can we itemize what we would like to have help with from the outreach guild uh, over to April?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, uh, Somehow I've got lost. Can you scroll down again, Ben?
Down.
No, up, sorry.
All right.
Up. Whoa, stop. In the middle part. Um, okay. I guess that I'm thinking about things like the starting date for this, and also the starting date for when we actually do the prep work before the start, that we don't have a date for yet either.
I'm going to brainstorm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, over to Ben.
Yeah, and I feel like yeah, I feel like this is in the right order, and the next thing that I have in mind is after these questions, which is, and it might be one of these things like we have to kind of play catchball where we imagine, step three and then come back to step two to, have it all make sense. Because the next part is like, how do we envision the actual club part working? Um, when we have our brainstormed list of, people's favorite articles, and we've done the 6 conversations and that's our foundation, and then we all come together, what's that look like? And in part, I don't think it's complicated, and I think it might just be it might actually just make it easier to figure out what the earlier steps look like. Um, so, and like I said, I think these are the questions, and really how do we itemize um, we've only talked about a few things, and there's a couple choices with each few thing, and that's pretty much it. So I think by itemizing that list, we can probably nail down today all of the prep stuff. And then I guess maybe that's the other thing I'm saying. I feel like we're almost ready for phase two. So I'm going to put in uh,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that feels I feel like, yeah, can we start doing the itemizing what we're looking for from the outreach guild, how we think that'll work. Over to you, Roland. Just keeping the circle going.
Yeah. Well, and this is in part a request for reminder and maybe a consideration because we have, phase one, phase two, phase three, and elements underneath them. But have we talked about the actual sequencing in the order in which to tackle these different parts? So, because I'm thinking about what's the sequence of things we need. Like, do we want to know what um uh do we want to have if we're doing polls to get suggestions from people about the books that they like, do we want to have that prepared before the outreach group or guild gets involved, or like what's the actual sequencing of things that need to be done, and what do we work on together, and what do we parse out?
That's okay. That's what I thought this question was.
Okay.
I thought that's what we're here to answer.
Okay.
Um, so yeah. Anyhow, sorry, I interrupted Circle.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to pass for now, and I'm going to call up the Asana so that I can look at the bits and pieces.
I can scroll back up too.
No,
So
no, it's okay. I think it'll be easier if I just look it up on my own,
okay.
unless other people wanted that.
I, no, I just have a question under the considerations though, um, we know that we'll get a date to do the brainstorming part, and then after that, have a starting date for the club. Um, is the brainstorming part, does that also include the prioritizing the list? Like, is the brainstorming actually, part one, part two?
I think it's like part A, part B.
Part
Yeah,
A,
yeah. Phase one, part A, phase one, part B.
good.
Well, and so we have, so it would be uh I'm going to try to keep it short. We can unpack all of these things, but basically, I think that's what we've talked about so far is we will look for multiple, actually, I guess there's also I think this is really all we talked about, right? So there may be more than one time we do it. There may be more than one question to more than one social media channel, but we ask people, what are your favorite articles or books? And we just get a list. And then once that list is together, we do something where we ask people to vote for your favorites on the list. We may want to do more than that. We haven't refined what that looks like. It could just be a simple vote, or it could be more complicated. It could be a clustering. We haven't talked through that part, but and then parallel to that, we are letting people know at multiple times this is coming. And then we work together to process things so that we have some sort of starting material for the conversation that's going to happen. And that's it, I think. So with that, is in terms of itemizing the different parts, so this doesn't talk about where we want help or how we do each of those, but I think this might be the itemized parts. Over to you, Roland. Is there anything missing from the itemized list?
I don't think so. I maybe this is some refinement or some detail. For the gathering favorite resources, I was thinking if we can start that soon so that we can do it over time, sort of putting out the request in different ways over time. I was also wondering about uh, um, once we have a mm, once we have a list of things that asking people to uh, there's like a way of doing it where it's like you've got 20 and then you can pick 10 and then pick them in order of interest and as a way of instead of voting. Anyway, I like those. They're fun. So that's why I was thinking of them. So that would be, I guess, the next step. Once we have our list of resources, then as a way of getting to what we want to start with. And yeah. So over to April.
All of that makes sense to me. So this now is what we need help with from the Outreach Guild, right? Do we have a explicit deadline for that? Do we want to talk to them next week, in 2 weeks, in a month? Do we want to sneak up on them, or do we want to give them the list and let them respond? And I suppose we should ask the Outreach Guild if they want help from us for anything to do with this. Over to Ben.
Well, I think we need to assume that most of this is stuff we need to do.
Okay.
And I wasn't assuming I was itemizing the list as a starting point,
right?
and I think then it becomes a question of where, on which of these items do we need to take on, and which of them can we ask for help? And of course, it's always going to be asking for help, so it's going to be, what, and I think being realistic at this point, like Roland was saying, we more or less constitute the outreach guild plus Ronnie. And maybe there are other people that we could engage. There are other people who are interested in the outreach guild, who we might be able to engage to do some of this. But I think the reality is, we are going to have to do most of the work ourselves, and we should figure out where we can. I think we should actually model how we think the mutual support system should work, which is we don't have staff, but we do have people who know things better than we do. So where is it that there's information, knowledge, expertise that we don't have that we could tap into? Um, and where can we also, because there's also fitting some of this in with, I think it would be easy to have a standing item on the newsletter for the next, 3 newsletters.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thing is easy to coordinate.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, so I think that, yeah, that's the coordination question. And, we are the ones, like with the poll, um, how often, and this is also sort of treating it like an experiment, how often do we think a question should go out? We've talked about, um, tying in things with the 6 conversations. So we could have a question a week that goes out, a poll that we do after each of the 6 conversations that really gets to the same thing. It's really like, what are your favorite resources? But we might have a slightly different question. So yeah, I think that's one of the questions we need to figure out, is how many times do we want to send something out? Um, I will say, frankly, my experience has been, we put stuff out there, people might think about it, but we don't get a huge response.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure what we would need to do. That's actually my big question, is what can we do to maximize the responses that we're getting? Um, just as an aside, I was working on the research proposal the other day, and I think I listed, um, some probably 20 some resources of my own that are like, in talking about the commons, and talking about, post-colonial, approaches, and talking about biomimicry. So in some ways, I don't think we could probably populate, like the
Yeah.
3 of us could come up with the bones of the reading list. And so really, it's as much as anything an opportunity to get other people thinking about it, and hearing about what people's favorites are, that, maybe other books that, oh yeah, like how many people are going to say braiding sweetgrass, you know, and um, and is somebody going to offer something other than braiding sweetgrass? Like that's kind of the question for me. So anyhow, I think I'm rambling right now, so I'm going to pass over to Roland.
Yeah, well, I was thinking along the same lines. I think what are the what is well, sorry. Um, what reading materials are we already familiar with that we would want to put forward, and is there anything that we would want to prioritize, to make sure was on the reading list, or that we think where we should start? And I think I like what you're saying, that we can probably populate it already, so we can look at um, uh, suggestions as being a tool for engagement, and with the possibility that there's something that is going to be suggested that we haven't thought of, that would be really great. So opening up that possibility, and also as a way of confirming maybe the materials that we have on the list and that we think is important, because that would be pretty cool, that we want to start, say, with hospicing modernity, and there are, and I'm totally going to exaggerate, but who knows, 125 people have responded, and 75% of them have hospicing modernity as up there on their list. So that's interesting information. So we can already start with an educated get, well, not an educated guess. We can already start with materials and the order of the materials that we think would be best. And then this becomes an opportunity for engagement and for confirmation and and possibly good or even better suggestions that we haven't thought of. So over to April.
I think a good way to engage people with this is, yeah, say that our brains aren't big enough to know everything that's out there. We really need the other brains to be contributing, helping us with this. And that this is, we see this as quite foundational. So it's an important question, I guess. And we really do want to know. I mean, this isn't just an exercise of some kind. But I mean, I think this is just a really good opportunity to be getting more people thinking about the things that we're thinking about, and reiterating to them that we don't think we have the answers. Again, it's like we need the power of the mutual thought circle out there. And it's an example of the way we want to work too. Right? Like it is kind of, like you said, Ben, modeling. And we know that actually giving people a few prompts is probably helpful, so they don't get the blank page syndrome. But beyond that, not giving so much that people think, oh, those guys already know what they want, and they've already got the list, and they don't really care. So, I guess being as invitational, as blatantly invitational as we can with this. Over to Ben.
Well, it makes me think that we can set up the single source and populate it. And that actually could be an interesting thing for us to do as a preparatory. It also helps because in what way is it foundational, and how do we think, it's a familiar model to say it's a reading list for a seminar. But I think we all are agreed it's not a seminar. It's not a university course where, you know what I mean? There's something else. We're hoping that it has some other quality.
Yes.
And I keep thinking about the Kumu map part of it. So it's not just the resources, but it's also associating people who are, these are my favorite resources, and these are your favorite resources, and there's something about knowing when to call you,
Yes.
So, it's not just having the universal list, what you need to know to pass the exam at the Lifeboat Academy. but there's something else about, well, and it's the connect the dots part,
Yeah.
right? And so there's something about the list itself is secondary
Yeah.
to something else, being able to, map the landscape,
Yeah.
something like that. So here's what I'm going to propose to sort of bring this into like more of a prescribed action list. So we we already have as a to-do list adding the single source, and that as a guild, I can pre-populate it, and then I will send it around internally, actually, to our all guild members to say we're sort of checking this out in advance. So that's step one. And I think that also there might be an interesting, so there's title and author, easy, right? We'll have that. And then is it an article, a book, whatever, a website? But then what are the other categories that we want to track? What's the subject area? Um, I have this in my mind, I keep wanting to divide theory from things that are theoretical, strategic, and tactical.
Yeah.
There are things where it's big ideas, but what do you do with it? And then there are things where it's like it gives you sort of an approach, it gives you some principles or some direction, but it's still not nitty gritty. And then there's some things that are like step one, do this.
Yeah.
And having some way, anyhow, I'm getting off in the weeds, but the point is what are the different ways that we might want to slice and dice the list? And I think that's where talking about what we think happens in phase two could be helpful to figuring out what we need to do in phase one. Does that make sense? Um, so I'm going to pass over with that. I think that's my proposal. I think we can combine pre-populating and the single source and put them together into one thing. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Roland.
Just as a little aside, the battery on my computer was almost dead, and I was trying to get the extension cord that is just in the next room, and it was all tangled up and stuck in the furniture. And so I had to spend all that time trying to get it out. And then I got here and I realized I didn't need the extension cord at all, but there's a plug right next to me. You're wondering why it was disappearing. It was because I was anyway. There you go. Yeah. Well, I can try. I like the idea of starting a list and sharing it, and keeping it simple to start just with and that's what I was understanding from part of what you were saying then. Just sending it to both active and inactive members of the guild, to because it seems like such a simple thing, and I think generally and especially the people who are part of the guild would be more than happy to be able to start making suggestions of there's this book, there's this website, there's this article. So I like that idea, and I like it, the simplicity and directness. Over to April.
Well, I'm thinking of a couple things. I'm thinking when people describe the resource, Ben suggested title, author, and subject area as part of that. And I think it could be divided into theoretical or conceptual or practical, or some variation of those descriptions. And I'm also wondering, do we want to ask anybody about why they're suggesting this? Like, what calls to you
Mm.
what how did you resonate and connect?
Hang on just a second. What do you need?
Sorry, I'm just getting the attention.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Um,
go ahead.
Something about like because that's a connection in itself, right? How uh people wouldn't be suggesting their favorite things without them having resonated somehow. So if there's some way to ask something about that, um, why did you connect with this to the extent that you're suggesting that other people would find it useful? Yeah. Without, I
Mhm.
mean, we don't want life stories as part of this.
Mhm. Was that over to me?
It's over to you.
Um, I'm actually kind of okay with life stories as part of it. I think that's really, and I guess that's part of the question too, is what happens in phase one and what happens in phase two. Because I think really the phase two, that's part of that conversation is for me, what I'm really curious about is I was talking to Andy Wildman yesterday. We were doing a podcast recording, and he was talking about, basically he is trying to be what I am thinking of as a lifeboat mentor. So he
Yeah,
wants to find people who are trying to make these changes and help coach them around living systems design approaches to figuring out how to move forward. So, I would say I want to coach people on setting up their experiment, and Andy wants to do the same thing with the same kinds of people, but setting up their design.
yeah,
And where am I going with this? And he was talking about how there are lots of things out there, lots of websites, lots of podcasts, lots of books, and there are some people who he had a more generous way of saying it. But for me, I think there's a lot of people who are just perfectly content sitting in their armchair reading about the end of the world
yeah,
and thinking deep thoughts about what they should do about the end of the world, but not doing anything,
yeah,
in any real tangible way. And so for me, that's actually, I kind of want to be able to poke and prod. Is this a book that is interesting to read that is mental masturbation? Like it
yeah,
feels good to think about how intellectually clever you are that you can see these things, or does it actually inspire change or action in some way? So I think those are really core. And I think if there's a way of getting, some of that in the phase one, cool. And it feels like that's the big part of phase two. Like for me, that kind of feels like the meat of the discussion.
yeah,
Why? And, of all of the resources, I think that's kind of the squeezing the list down. It's easy to say there are all of these cool things and all of these cool ways of thinking about things. If you only had 12 weeks
yeah,
to introduce somebody to the core concepts, you could only have 20 references or whatever it is, pick your number. Why would this make the list? And so it's also, I guess, some of the criteria, not just for the individual thing, but maybe what are the criteria for things that rise to the top of the list?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think that's uh I think that was largely a long-winded ditto. So over to Roland.
It's okay. We're used to it by now.
Oh, shush. I have many other useful and practical qualities.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. Yes. And even your rambles. So to me, it sounds like where we're going is towards what are the questions we want to ask. And from what I was getting from this round was, have you used this resource in your life in a practical way, and how and why? Uh, And so, and I also wanted to say I was going with April towards, getting people to try to be concise. So not being an evaluator or uh, a statistician. If you, I'm willing to help in or being not helping, but being part of parsing through or going through the information that we receive. But if it's going to be somebody's life story, I'm going to need help in being able to pull out the useful parts.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the idea behind being concise is to make it to be able to get the information without having to sift through a lot of stuff.
Yes,
And
yes,
I can also understand, in terms of dealing with primary resources, there's always a lot to have to sift through. And that could, is that a more effective way of getting better information or not? So over to April. And just I also wanted to point out a time check.
What time is it?
It's 3:04.
Okay, cool.
um, okay, I did have a thought that followed on from that, but it's now escaped me. Oh, well, just at least initially, we don't want people's life stories. I mean, later on, the storytelling around this could be quite central itself.
Mm-hmm.
But at the minute, we just want to know in the first slice,
Mm-hmm.
more top of the head stuff. Why?
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I had to say. Over to Ben.
Yeah, yeah, and that totally makes sense. I think those are both really good points. And I've actually adjusted the notes to kind of reflect that. So I've added, that sort of down. So Roland, I interpreted your prompt as sort of thinking through phase two. Because I think in phase one, the question's what are your favorite resources and why give us in a sentence or two,
Yeah,
kind of thing. And then phase two is really that's kind of figuring out what we do once we have our sort of partially digested list of resources, then what is the larger conversation that we have as part of the phase two work? Which does, and I'm thinking about the tidiness of um, the six conversations. There's six, which is that many, not that many. That's so it's six. Anyhow, the um, maybe that's another question we should ask ourselves is how many sessions of the Connect the Dots Club are there to begin with? Eventually, we're talking about a semester course or whatever, like the intro course, and that's going to set that time frame. So how many meetings do we want to prepare for that?
right.
Um, and I mean, I think six is as good a number as any other to start, but you know what I mean? I don't know that the number really matters, but that might give us some
Yeah.
focus. Over to you, Roland.
Well, okay, so phase one, we have questions and they are concise. We ask for so I guess in phase one, do we even want to ask qualitative questions or do we want to just stick with quantitative ones? Those are terms, right?
Mhm.
And that in phase two, we would go more towards the quantitative type questions.
Other way around.
Qualitative, yes. So that makes sense to me, I think, asking like your favorite resources and why is it useful. So how would we ask why is it useful in phase one in a quantitative way as opposed to qualitative? Or I guess it doesn't have to be either or. It's the conciseness that I'm trying to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to, that's all I want to say. That's all I have to say. Over to April.
But there could be consequences for saying that. That's what I read early on.
There are consequences to
Um,
everything.
I have something running through my head like, 6 conversations, 12 books, 18 articles, and 24 people we should talk to. So an expanding universe there. So maybe that's the 5-year plan. I don't know. I have nothing else to add to this except curiosity about starting dates for doing stuff.
Mhm.
Other than that, nothing else. Over to Ben.
I think in that same spirit of just having we've got the 6 conversations coming up. We've talked about a follow-up from each one. Um, so I am thinking we may want to have uh 6 flavors of more or less the same question that we ask following up on. So we could actually announce at each of the 6 at the conversation at the end of each of the conversations about lifeboats, we can say, and as a follow-up, we want you to think about what are your favorite resources around, the themes that have come up tonight. And we'll be doing that on the Facebook
Yeah,
page and invite anyone to join that conversation. So we can also recruit the people to recruit some friends. So, we can just have a number. Let's say our poll is going to be 6 different questions that basically get at what are your favorite resources. I think there may be a way, um, just in terms of making it appealing for people to participate, some qualitative part of it makes it more interesting.
yeah,
Your favorite book title and author, full stop, is less interesting for people than to say what you love about it. You
yeah,
know, um, and it could be, maybe I'm just saying like some of the flavors could be um lots of people are familiar with braiding sweetgrass and hospicing modernity and active hope. And they recommend these books. Do you have an alternative that you prefer to one of these
yes,
or
yes,
something like that,
yeah,
um, or yeah, or even I don't want to get into the weeds, but I'm just saying if we set for ourselves a task, let's come up with 6 poll questions. And each poll question basically asks for a favorite resource and gives people a 1 sentence about what they love about it, what they hate about it, whatever. Um, no, so in terms of components, we will in the guild and among active lifeboat users develop the single source and shop that around and get people's input. And we will have 6 poll questions that loosely correspond to each of the 6 conversations. And we will invite people to those poll questions. So we're going to have to write what those 6 questions are. We'll have to come up with those. And then we will have some sort of device where we ask people to sort and prioritize, however, that master list that's a broader invitation. And there are some interesting tools that could be used, like Roland's talking about there's picking your favorites, and then there's also there's ways of clustering them. There's ways of dot voting them. There's ways of prioritizing them in an order. So we need to figure out what that tool looks like for us. And again, I don't think the actual results of that are as important as getting people to the chance
yeah,
to play with it.
yeah,
And then we think about how many sessions are there following up in the phase 2, and probably each one is going to have some activity. And I can think of a few that we've already talked about, a few activity or question. So what is so that's one. There's something to do with clustering. What are the core topics that need to get covered? And we're actually answering this question here. Have you used the resources? Why are they your favorite resources? How have you used them? Generally speaking, what are the criteria for prioritizing resources, which is related to that? I guess within each subject area, then there's, kind of in that subject area, how do we prioritize the books? Anyhow, it's starting to feel to me like there's a fairly, it's a discrete laundry list. We need 6 or so poll questions. We need one spreadsheet that we pre-populate with articles. We need a list of what topics do we cover at each of the phase 2 meetings. Over to you, Roland. Does that make sense?
That's landing well with me. So I'll pass with again another time check. And are we ready to develop an action plan, or are we still in the considerations developing ideas until the next meeting? Over to April.
I think we're getting close to developing an action plan, and Ben was starting to articulate a couple of things that sound to me like action. I think we have enough to be getting on with, and then more stuff I think will pop up the next time we talk about this. That would be my feeling at the moment. And I'm also getting excited about this because we're turning it more and more into an engagement process as we go on, both an engagement process and then also going to another level of kinds of questions each time, which are highly motivational for people and highly cohesive, I guess you would say. So that's only a good thing, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Over to Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's and I was elaborating in some sense, I think this hasn't changed very much. I'm glad I procrastinated, because actually now I think the single reference point, I can do that now, and I will pre-populate it with my list and then start sending it around, just so that, and that's great because I can just put down what I like and move it on, and people can just keep adding to it. And likewise, the brainstorming template, I think we can fill out that. I can put the slots in that we need to answer, like what's the the technology that's actually, I think, an area where we need help from outreach, is what's the right technological form for this? Do we just do it in Facebook? Whatever. So that's coordinating, I think, yeah, I think there's a plan. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to forget any of the pieces. Yeah, so I feel like we have action items. Over to you, Roland.
Cool. I don't have anything to add, so to April.
Okay, I don't think I have anything to add to this either, except have we divided up any of the tasks? Which is causing me some anxiety because I already have several pages of unfulfilled tasks for other things. So I'm thinking, oh, how long can I make that list? Um, those those are my questions on to Ben.
I think I think these I don't know that we've added any tasks. I think we've just clarified, and I've taken on I am good with the brainstorming template and the single point of reference and the coordination with outreach. And yeah, so I don't know that we've really added anything, and I feel like we've started. I think the next step for the next guild meeting is to talk through phase two,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and maybe some of the details, like what does the prioritization look like,
yeah,
like that's
yeah.
but I feel like now we actually have a plan that gets us through the end of the six conversations.
Yep.
Like I think we know when how we advertise, and um we probably need a blurb though, actually, now that I think about it, for the newsletter. Um, and that would be, would anybody be willing to take that on? Just a quick blurb um, to, describe the, what would, how, who, what's the invitation to the Connect the Dots Club? What are we doing and who should come? And that would be the blurb.
I can do that. And for when do we want, like, what is it, sort of like a leading up, or
Well, if we could by the first conversation, which is next Tuesday. And it doesn't have to be, it would just be a verbal thing. So actually we could kind of try it out.
a verbal thing?
Yeah.
How do you mean a verbal thing?
It it wouldn't have to be wordsmith to be in print, because it would be something we would
Oh,
just
you
say at the
would,
end.
during the session for the six
Yeah.
conversations at the end, just say it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So next Tuesday, hey?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm not sure where we are in circle and such. So if it was at me, I'm passing on to Roland.
I think we're maybe at the end, and I think at this point, I would suggest that we just popcorn. If there's anything else that anyone wants to talk about, any other comments about what we have talked about, anything that would be useful between now and next time. So popcorn. I don't have to over to anyone, just popcorn. Whoever wants to pop in and say something.
I believe I have popped all my corn.
Okay. I will contribute the butter and the salt. And a little black pepper is nice in there too. So great. Um, I am wondering, would it be useful to kind of just go over what we've got for the end here before doing a closing?
I think especially these action items,
Yeah.
and and then I think we can say next meeting. We talked about how does the Because yeah, I think so. Basically, I don't think there'll be any challenge with in terms of outreach. We'll get a steady drumbeat at the newsletters and in our social media posts. And as long as we have a blurb, here's what we're inviting people to, and you know, that's getting that on there. Um, and then working with Ronnie in particular to see if they have some good ideas about what's the right format, for it. How does it get shared around? Um, Creating the single point, sending that around. Yeah, I think that's all we've talked about. Does anyone see anything that's missing or?
Yeah, looks good.
I'm
Yeah,
even thinking, that the timeline, the 6 conversations end middle of July. Um, I think we, at the very least, want probably 2 weeks for us to be able to do some processing and, refining. So the question is, do we want to start sometime in August or wait till early September? Um, but I think even the timeline pretty much is suggesting itself. Um,
I have actually a question about the 6 conversations. I have been thinking of them as that what is starting on Tuesday is the first one, and that they will be followed up by others. And is that a correct assumption? Has that been discussed? And if it is, then what?
the first series of 6 conversations that is followed
Yeah.
by, I think the way I would answer it is um, it's an experiment. So with the intention that this would be a regular offering, but in part we have to see how it goes. And ideally, using the kind of academy model, the 6 conversations is people who are thinking about joining the Lifeboat Academy would go through the 6 conversations and then say, yes, I would like to join the Lifeboat Academy, or make an informed decision at the end of it. So what would happen then is the Connect the Dots Club, every time there would be a 6 conversations, it would be followed up by like the first semester of the Lifeboat Academy. So you'd say, yes, I want to be a part of it. And then you would, join in the latest seminar in the Connect the Dots Club.
So I guess the my next question is if there's the related and that it is an ongoing thing, what is the timing? So like what's the space between the last one of the 6 conversations and the beginning of the beginning of the next cycle?
Mhm.
Would it be simpler, given that if it is once per week, so then that is a month and a half approximately, then having it quarterly, would that make sense? Because then there would be another 6 weeks between each conversation. Anyway, I think I'm just playing around with ideas. So we don't. This isn't necessarily a discussion that I'm starting. I think I'm just babbling now because I'm curious.
Yeah,
So I will stop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think those are really interesting and good questions. And partly we had a question about whether we do them every week or every other week, the 6 conversations. So one of the things we'll be figuring out is that the right tempo? So we don't want to make too many decisions based on scheduling until we see whether or
yeah.
not the every week works. And that actually might inform whether the Connect the Dots Club continues every week, or is that an every other week, or um, I do think there's something about if we're onboarding people, having a full semester, a full 12 weeks, partly that matches with sociocracy and the, 3 to 4 month segments. And I think if we had something where it was guild work on the odd weeks and connect the dots club on the even weeks. And so, six
Mhm.
meetings of the guilds, 6 meetings of the Connect the Dot Club over the space of the semester, so that there's a real intentional, like practical, it's aim, act, reflect, isn't it? Right? Like getting into the guilds is, kind of getting into the doing practical part of it. Connect the dots is an opportunity to kind of step back and look at the big picture.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, and I think that these are all, it is really interesting and intriguing and exciting to think about how it can all fit together. And there's only so far we can go before we, you know, take the next experiment.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's all I have to say. Anybody else? Anything else?
Nope.
No, I'm good. I think we got a lot done.
Cool. So, one round of what are you taking away with you from this experience? April, would you start?
Well, I think I continue to take away how important considerations are, and then reconsidering your considerations and considering other people's considerations. But just the more of that and the more processing of that can happen, then the I think more stable and sustainable the decision is at the end. And if it's not, you get to check back anyway in a few weeks to see what the heck happened. We thought that was great, but apparently not, or whatever. So just brought back to that again. And over to Ben.
I've got a big ditto. And I feel like it really is this weaving that um, I am feeling myself more and more relaxing into. Part of that considerations is just let's put it out there. You
Yeah,
don't you don't have to worry about where it's going to go. You just put out the considerations. It seems like ideas start to take shape, and as they take shape, they imply the next steps. And it's like all you really need to do is figure out the next steps, and it's the sophisticate, well, at least this may all be massive self-delusion, but it feels like the sophistication of what is coming out of the process of, in some sense, we joke about how we're also on the outreach guild, and but allowing that sort of the ability to sort of put on a different hat and kind of, look at it from one perspective and think about outreach as a totally different group and what would they do and how would they work. And then it really seems to allow for well, I'm excited to see where it goes. Actually, I think that's my big takeaway is relax into the process, and I feel a lot of energy around. I'm just these seem like cool ideas, and I'm looking forward to what they produce. Hopefully it will be, I will modulate my expectations, right? I will try to step back and allow it to be an experiment, but I feel a lot of potential. So that's really cool. Over to you, Roland.
Think the one thing that sticks out for me from these meetings is that we are publishing them, and there are people who are watching them, and I see you people. And I'm really curious about when you're listening to all of this, is there anything that's coming up for you? And are you getting any ideas? And if you are, I again make the invitation to share them with us. That is how you can participate if you
Mhm.
feel compelled to participate.
I feel like adding the standard YouTube, and remember to hit the subscribe button and the like down below.
Actually, not being a particularly techie person, I was going back to my childhood in romper room with Miss whatever her name is
Miss
with the
Marsha.
mirror thing. And and I see Alyssa and I see Franklin and I see
Yeah.
I think next time I will try to bring a hand mirror.
Well, and seriously though, for folks who are watching on YouTube, you can easily make comments. So any thoughts, any questions,
Look
you know,
below. It's
look
somewhere.
below.
I can't tell you where because I don't know it myself, but it's there. All right. Thank you. And thank you very much. And I think that Ben and April will continue the meeting
Right.
their own ends. And so I will stop the recording now and I will wish you till next time, since I will be seeing both of you next time, but at different times. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.